Hey guys, thanks for watching my channel and video here. If you like my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I have a few stories here to share with you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy! First, I have to apologize because I don't know specifics as far as where exactly this took place, or the names of the people involved. My mother has a friend, or co-worker, can't remember exactly since this was a few years ago, she told me, who used to live in Maine. I'm 90% sure it's Maine. Once again, apologies. Who lived next to a family she considered to be normal. A husband, wife, and 2 sons had lived there, and nothing ever seemed out of place. One day, my mother's friend was sitting in her house and smelled something a little off. The smell was one of those weak smells that don't seem terrible. It even makes you think that it's just in your head. Fast forward 2 days, and the smell had grown stronger and worse. When she called the authorities, they determined that the smell was coming from the neighbor's house. When they investigated, they discovered that the parents had decided to cook their own sons in the oven and just leave it on. Who does that? I mean, if it was just one person, you could say that was, unfortunate as the situation is, it is insanity. When 2 people conspire, however, that is not insanity. That is something else entirely. I guess you could say that it is pure evil, but I feel like that is too vague a statement. Does anybody know of anything, psychologically speaking or otherwise, that would cause 2 grown adults to do something like this? Maybe it is insanity, but I feel that would be unlikely in this situation. My parents' friend told me once about a genuine terrifying story that happened to be someone at his work. His colleague at work, a woman in her mid-30s, was on holiday in Portugal with her family for the summer. Herself and her daughter were shopping in a supermarket close to the hotel, just for a second to collect some groceries from the shelves. The mother let go of the daughter's hand. The mother collects her things and begins to move to the next aisle, and that is when she notices her child is missing. This took place shortly after the Madeleine McCain disappearance, and fully aware that she was in a crowded supermarket, the mother flips out. She starts screaming for her child, that her child is missing, and is so distressed that the store freaks out with her. Shutters come down, alarms are sounded, and the staff begin a search for the girl. They found the girl still alive in the bathroom. Her hair had been cut and she was wearing a different set of plain clothes. If they had taken but a few seconds more to find her, she would have been gone for good. Thinking about it gives me chills. I'm a tour guide in Savannah, Georgia. I tell this story on my historical and haunted tours, and as far as I know, it's all true. Savannah suffered 3 major fires in 1796, 1820, and 1889. Immediately after each fire, yellow fever swept the city. Stagnant water had collected in the foundations of the buildings destroyed by the fires, breeding mosquitoes and spreading yellow fever. The citizens thought the epidemic was airborne, and the seemingly coincidental and devastating events led many to believe the city was cursed. Yellow fever is nasty. It begins like the flu. Children and people with compromised immune systems would often experience liver failure, resulting in jaundice, hence yellow fever. Ultimately, people ended up vomiting blood, which appeared black and reinforced the belief that the city was cursed and that the infected were possessed by demons. Most who made it to this stage of the illness died, but some fell into a coma, which, by those medical standards, closely resembled death. Because the citizens believed the epidemic to be airborne, they felt it was of the utmost importance to bury the yellow fever victims as quickly as possible. Some comatose victims were mistaken for dead and buried alive. The city of Savannah built over most of its cemeteries, and burial records were destroyed in the fires. There have been instances in recent years in which workers have unearthed coffins with scratch marks inside the lids, bodies with broken fingers, etc. And the creepiest about it all is that there has been outbreaks of yellow fever in the past couple of years. I worked for an assisted living company for about 6 years. During that time, I experienced my fair share of death. Some went peacefully, some went smiling, some went crying, some went with family, others with just the staff around them. One lady went with something else entirely. I was helping out the nursing staff with resident wake-ups because someone had called off. One particular resident who I was assigned to, we'll call her Catherine, was a hell of a woman. Loud, sassy, hilarious, and kind, she was very well put together and relatively fit for her age. This morning, however, I noticed that something was off. Long story made very short. Within an hour, she was virtually unconscious with severe heart failure. As we were already short-staffed, none of the nurses or aides could sit with her while she spent her final hours in bed, so I decided that I would stay and sit with her until family arrived. About 3 hours I sat with Catherine. She mostly slept. Occasionally she would mumble something or squeeze my hand, but mostly she slept with very slow, labored breaths. A nurse came in to let me know that Catherine's son was just about 20 minutes from the building, and that I could go home if I wanted to. What was more than 20 minutes, though? I didn't want to leave. I'm sitting there with her peacefully, knowing that she was likely less than an hour from death. I remember very specifically looking at the clock to see how much longer until her son was to arrive, and the moment that I looked away, Catherine shot straight up, stared around where the wall and ceiling met, and let out a blood-curdling scream. This woman could hardly breathe and hadn't moved a muscle in an hour. There's absolutely no explanation for her sudden strength, nor do I have an explanation for the pure terror in her eyes. Catherine used her last breath with that scream. She fell back, white as paper, and was gone. The nurses rushed in to ask what happened. I barely got it out before I excused myself to the bathroom, and I just sat there and shook for an hour. I've never been more terrified in my life. Catherine's son showed up about 5 minutes later. The nurses told him that she went peacefully and with people by her side, but she did not go peacefully, and I left her the second she passed. I have never been a believer in the afterlife, but this experience rattled me to my core. Edit. A lot of people are commenting about how they saw this before and wondering if I'm even OP or even if this is even true. I am OP and this is true. I asked a question the other day on here about unsettling death experiences, and this was my answer to it. I'm a paramedic and have been for about 10 years now, and I've seen a lot of disturbing things, but one thing sticks out to me more than the rest. When I was still new, I went on a call for flu-like symptoms, and the elderly lady literally had just had fever, body aches, and a cough with no other complaints, so we were all thinking she might actually have the flu. She wanted to go to the hospital, so we got her on the cot, and the design of her ground floor apartment with all her furniture made it impossible to turn the cot around, so we had to wheel her out backwards with me at her feet, staring at her face. We just get out of the door when she lets out this horrific gurgle scream, turns gray, and slumps over. My partner and another firefighter were next to her head and confirmed she had no pulse. We are close to the truck, so we load her up while I start CPR. As I start pumping her chest, she goes from this blank stare of the dead to looking right at me with this confused look on her face, and started moving her arms trying to get me to stop. So I do. Instantly she was back to dead again, complete with blank stare and no movement. This time the three of us all confirmed no pulse, and so I continue CPR, and she starts looking up at me again with the same confused look, and moving her arms around again. Now I'm thinking this has got to be a mistake. She can't be dead and moving while I do CPR, can she? I stop, check, still dead with no pulse. Resume CPR, and yes again. She was looking up right at my eyes, moving again, so weirded out as I was, I just started talking to her to try to let her know why I was doing CPR on her, as my partner got the cardiac monitor defibrillator pad stuck on her. When I stopped for the rhythm check, she was in ventricular fibrillation. A single shock and we got a slow pulse back. Started the cardiac monitor's pacing function, and while she never regained consciousness, we got her to the hospital alive. Found out later she ultimately died at the hospital, but I'll never forget that look on her face while we made eye contact while I did CPR on her. I had no idea what could happen, but the doctor in the ER told me that if CPR is started quickly enough and the compressions are deep enough, you can actually remain somewhat conscious during it, even if your heart is otherwise not beating. It has happened to me a handful of times since then, and so I always talk to my dead patients now while we are doing CPR, just in case. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked my content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.